Morning, everyone. Morning. So much better. So before I introduce today's speaker, I just wanted to give a note about next month's speaker, since we have a nice audience here today, and we do have some literature on the different tables here. But on November 9th, we have Nicole McGoran coming to speak, Program Director of Alzheimer's Association from the Massachusetts and New Hampshire chapter, to be speaking on understanding Alzheimer's and dementia. It should be a very interesting breakfast. Well, this morning we have quite a treat. We have Dale Arnold coming to speak, a Mainer. We'll let Mainers in every so often. You remember we had Tom Karen here a couple of times. He's a Mainer, something in the water in Maine that allows him to be really good sports announcers. Dale is a graduate of Mount Ararat High School. Go Eagles! Pretty cool. I took the time to look that up. Also a graduate of Bowdoin College. Go Polar Bears. He began broadcasting football back in Brunswick, Maine in 1971 at the age of 15. Upon graduating from Bowdoin, he became the play-by-play announcer for the Maine Mariners. He eventually moved to radio play-by-play, for those that remember, the New Jersey Devils in 1986. Then returned to New England as radio voice for the New England Patriots in 1988. He became the talk show host of WEEI Radio in Boston on September the 1st, 1991. Added Boston Bruins radio play-by-play duties in 1995, while continuing his work at WEEI. He moved to television play-by-play on NESN for the Bruins the following year, and displaying the notion that he had a face for radio. He began hosting Boston Bruins games on NESN in 2011. Served as play-by-play voice for the New England Revolution in the MLS for a season, was a filling voice for the Boston Celtics for several seasons, added play-by-play duties for the Boston Red Sox, thus becoming the only person in Boston broadcast history to serve as play-by-play announcer for all 5 professional sports teams in the city. He also, if that's not enough, did play-by-play for Boston college football, college hockey, and the Bean Hawk tournament. He retired from WEEI Radio on March the 12th, 2021, and from NESN in 2023 is a 4-time New England Regional Emmy Award winner, inducted into Maine's Association of Broadcasters and Massachusetts Broadcasters Association Hall of Fame. Please give a warm Brotherhood welcome to Dale Arnold.
I don't think there's a whole lot left for me to say, to be honest. Good morning. Morning. I was the oldest of 5 kids growing up in a mobile home in rural Maine. The best guess of the United States Census Department is that when I graduated from high school, there was 1,675 people in my town. My best guess is that there were also about 3,000 dogs. A realistic career goal for me would have been to get a job at Bath Iron Works, got out 40 years, retire, take my pension, and hopefully have enough money to get me a small camp on a lake somewhere. There was just one big problem with all of that, is that I really, really liked sports. Once I disavowed myself of the notion that I was going to become the center fielder for the Red Sox, and for the record, they did make the right choice with Fred Lynn. I tried to figure out a way that I could be around sports, make a living at it, and it turned out to be broadcasting. As Stu mentioned, I started doing games on the radio and getting paid for it when I was 15 years old. Among the games that I was doing while I was in high school and immediately after was college hockey, the Bowdoin games on the radio. My color announcer was a Bowdoin grad who said, "You've got to go to Bowdoin." I was a student at the University of Southern Maine at the time, and I said, "Look, they take about 3 transfer students a year. They'll never let me in." And he said, "I'll make a bet with you. You apply. If you get into Bowdoin, you've got to go. If you don't get in, I'll pay the application fee." I applied. I lost the bet, so I went to Bowdoin. It was the best decision I ever made, thankfully. I got an opportunity to learn how to learn. Years later, my son went to Bowdoin, and I remember I thanked the admissions director for giving him the opportunity to go there, and the admissions director said, Dale, let's get something straight. Your kid was going to get into Bowdoin whether you went here or not. He went on to get his PhD from Yale, so they were probably right about that. No. But I got the opportunity to do games on the radio starting, as Stu mentioned, I kind of progressed as the years went on. And I think when I left college, my fervent hope and desire was that I could work in a major league sport of some kind. I had no dream, no idea that I would get the opportunity to work in 5 of them. It just worked out that way as the years went on. And I'm thoroughly convinced that much of that has to do with my own personal philosophy of life, if you'll allow me to be so bold. Way back when I was working in minor leagues, I used to take the players out on school visits. And we'd take a bag of equipment and we'd dress one of the school kids up, and then we would talk to the kids, and then we would sit and sign whatever the kids put in front of us. And one day, I had a young player out with me, and we did the whole thing. We sat down to sign things at the end of the program, and his line was just moving so slow. I would sign, hand it away, and I'd look and he'd be there forever. And finally, I looked over his shoulder, and for every single youngster who came to his table, he would write, whatever you want most wants you. And then he'd sign his name. And I thought, God, that's a great philosophy of life. Now, there are some pitfalls here, okay? Whatever you want most wants you. I really, really wanted to dunk a basketball. But I'm 5'6", so chances are no matter how badly I want it, it's not going to happen. You've got to be realistic. But you've got to have goals, you've got to work towards those goals, and you've got to get the opportunity to show people that you'll be the hardest working person in the room. And that was the difference for me. I did begin sports talk radio on the day WEEI opened the doors. We were wildly unsuccessful to start. But it was a town that I thought if all sports radio was ever going to work, it was going to work here, in this town, in this sports marketplace. And we were ultimately very successful until competition came in and made us not so successful. The bottom line is, and we're all, well, most of us are of a certain age here, so we know that I was doing sports talk radio in the most unbelievably successful period any city has ever had for sports, ever. 6 Super Bowl championships, 3 World Series championships, including breaking a drought that went way back to, the 1920s. A Celtics NBA title, a Bruins Stanley Cup title, all of this at a time I'm doing sports talk radio. So it was kind of plug and play. It was kind of easy. But I noticed as the years went on, despite the wild success of the sports teams in this town, and it was phenomenal, the fans weren't reacting the same way. The last year that I did sports talk radio, I did from my basement because of COVID. It kind of opened my eyes a little bit. There were people on our radio station who were going back into the studio to do their jobs. Management ownership of our radio station told Glenn Ordway and me that we were not allowed to go back in because we were older. And there was a lot that was unknown about COVID at that point. They told us simply, you can't come into the building. You have to work from home. So I did. And I worked the show. And if I didn't tell people I was working from home, they'd have no way of knowing. Except some of the other hosts on the radio station who were going in to do theirs told anyone who would listen to their shows that I didn't have the guts to go in. That I was afraid to go in. That they were going in and everything was fine, so why couldn't I go in, or why couldn't Glenn go in? And I started to realize that sports talk radio had changed. I don't think I had, but I think the industry had changed. As I said, I did the last year of my show from my basement. And on the day I ended, March 12th, 2021, I was relieved. I was happy. I wanted out. And it wasn't just the COVID stuff. It was the teams. It was the atmosphere, the attitude of the fans. Sports talk radio became, have a take. Don't talk about the teams. Don't talk about the players. Have a take. People were so bitter. And people were so angry. And I'm thinking, what the heck do you have to be angry about? Your teams are awesome. Better than any city in the United States of America. And that made me wonder about society in general. This is as wild-eyed as I'm going to get for you here. Everybody's angry. Everybody's mad. Everybody's upset. And it's one thing to go through life feeling that way. It's another thing to go through life sitting in front of a microphone asking people to tell me how angry they were. I didn't need to do that anymore. And I didn't. And never looked back a moment, never missed it a day since I walked out the door. Now, I was working Bruins games on Nesson, working with two of my best friends, Billy Chappie and Barry Peterson. Loved every minute of it, enjoyed everything about it, had a great time. Last December, after I had retired from both, my wife and I had moved home back to Maine. Nesson called me last Thanksgiving and said, one of our announcers is having some problems. Would you come in and help us out and host the games again? It could be a month. It could be for the season, but we need help. And I said, sure. I went back last December 1st, came out of retirement, did the games on TV, on Nesson again with Billy and Barry and others. Had a great time. Loved all of it. About March, it did end up being for the entire season, by the way. And about March, I said to my wife, if Nesson came to me tomorrow and said, hey, can you come back and do next year? I'd have said, nope. No, I think I've had enough of this too. Not for any bitterness reasons, because I'm old, for God's sakes, and I wanted to be retired back in Maine. I found that commuting from Woolwich, Maine to games at the Garden or the studio in Watertown was not as easy as it used to be. It took a little more time in the car and a little more mileage. On my 2016 Kia Sorento, which I just traded in with 301,000 miles on. That car owed me nothing. So I came out of retirement last year. I did it. That was fine. I had a great time. I'm happy to go back to Maine and be retired again. Except I suck at the retirement thing. I've been asked if I'll teach a class at Boston University beginning next fall, and so I'm going to get back into public commute from Maine. One day a week. I can handle one day a week, and I can do this. So I'm back doing, I think, what I've never done before, but which I think I'll enjoy. And as somebody at my table said earlier, those who can do and those who can't teach, and that's probably how I'm going to approach this as well. That's the background of how I got to be here, how I worked my way through the system to get the opportunity to do what I did for a living for a long time and loved every minute of it. Till I didn't love some minutes of it. But I'd really rather spend the time that we have here answering questions that you might have. Now, the beauty of being retired is that I really don't give a damn. And so I'm probably going to be more forthcoming and honest than I might have been if we'd been doing this a few years ago. That's the beauty of it. So any questions that you might have that I can answer, I'd be happy to. And if I can't, I'll duck them, but it's probably not going to be a lot of those.
I'm curious, when you move on to a new sport, how much research and homework do you have to do before you go on the air? Do you have to know all the players in the league? And
well, it is obviously a lot of work, and it's a great question. What I found is that the single most important thing to begin a different sport, and I did 5 of them, was vocabulary. I'll give you an example. In hockey,
So I do have to.
there is no such thing as offsides.
Gotcha.
It's offside. But if you say offsides, you make the hockey fans mad. And that's just a simple example of vocabulary. When I did New England Revolution soccer, I had to really do some work and learn the vocabulary of the sport. The players are one thing. That's universal. You have to know the players no matter what sport you're doing. But you have to know the vocabulary. How far is the free throw line? How far is the three-point line? Is it a 30-foot shot or is this a 25-foot shot? Know the dimensions of the court. Know what you're describing to the people at home.
A lot more to this than there.
As far as the players are
I thought
concerned,
just putting
as I
in
said,
the cord
that's
and go to sleep.
universal. You know the home team players without question. You learn the visiting team players as you need to. When I did New England Patriots football, by the way, just for the record, one of the years I did Patriots football, they were 1-15, and it was not my fault. Nothing to do with it. What you learn is that I don't memorize the names of all of the offensive linemen on the visiting team. I memorize the names of the people who are likely to touch the football. The quarterback, the running backs, the wide receivers, the tight ends. Because those are the people you have to identify. You probably don't have to identify the right tackle very often. And if you do, you can look down at your depth chart and come up with a name for that. So it is different for every sport. The pace, obviously, is different for every sport. Hockey is what I've always described as verbal gymnastics. It's fast, and you've got to keep up, and you've got to be able to, describe things at a pretty fast pace. Soccer is glacial. You'll have these 60-yard cross-pitch passes, and I was doing the games on the radio at the time, so people can't watch it and see it on TV, so you're going, and... So, soccer was slow. Football is 8 seconds of action and 40 seconds of downtime, fill time. Baseball is pretty much downtime most of the time. It's when you hear announcers telling a lot of stories and convincing back and forth and all of that stuff. So it's different no matter what sport you're doing. Basketball, much like hockey, is up-tempo and fast-paced. Yes, sir.
What kind of relationship did you have with athletes throughout the years, and what is the biggest change you've seen in the temperament of the athletes throughout the years?
It's a great question. I tried to have a respectful but arm's length relationship with athletes. And I'll give an example. I would travel with the Bruins. I'm on their bus, going to their plane, going to their hotel, and traveling with the team. If I was going out to dinner in Winnipeg, and I walked into a restaurant and saw some players sitting in there, I would leave. Because I didn't want to be seen as, A, trying to socialize with players, or B, giving them the impression that I was looking over what was going on over there. If a player invited me, and it can happen from time to time throughout the years, if Ray Bork says, hey, Dale, we're going out to dinner, you want to join us? That's different. Sure, I'd be happy to. That's great. I always tried to be respectful. I also found that athletes in general, and it does vary sport to sport, but hockey players in particular, are harder on themselves than I was ever going to be on radio or TV. So I never worried about what I might say. I will give you one quick story about somebody who didn't like what I said. Wasn't a player, it was a coach. I was doing the Bruins games on TV, and it was the Black Friday game, I think. And Mike Keenan was the coach of the Bruins at the time. And for some reason, no, there was a reason. Mike Keenan's a jerk. Like I just said, I don't give a damn. What do I care? So Mike Keenan benched 2 players for the third period. And at one point during the telecast, we showed Don Sweeney, and I forget who the other player was, sitting at the end of the bench because Keenan had benched them. And the score was like 7-1 at the time. And I said on the telecast, I said, it's hard for me to believe that Don Sweeney did anything more egregious than anybody else. The team did not play especially well today. The next day, Saturday, I get a phone call from the equipment manager for the Bruins. Dear friend of mine named Peter Henderson. And Peter says, Mike Keenan wants your head. They had been watching the video Saturday in the locker room. I didn't know they watched it with audio. he heard what I said, and he starts screaming, "I'm going to get that guy fired. I want his head. I'm going to have him out of here." So I called my contact within the management of the Bruins, a guy named Nate Greenberg, who to this day is one of my best friends. And I said, "Nate, I heard I'm in trouble." And he paused for a moment and he said, "Dale, let me put it to you this way. We'll be here longer than he is." So they played the next day, Sunday. They were playing at the Garden. And I figured I'm going to make myself available so that if Mike Keenan wants to say something to my face, I'm going to be right there and he can do it. So I stood in the hallway outside the Bruins locker room at the Garden, and I just waited. Now, I never saw Keenan. But at one point, as the players were arriving, Don Sweeney is coming down the hall. And he goes by the locker room door, and he goes about 20 more feet where I'm standing, waiting for Mike Keenan to come blister me. And Don Sweeney comes up to me. He never says a word. He sticks out his hand. He shakes my hand. He winks. And he goes back into the locker room. So that was a relationship that wasn't particularly good. And I'm fine with that.
Hi, Steve Elcher. Wow, that's loud. First time asker, long time listener. I'm sure you get all this.
Well played.
So I was a communications dropout before I joined the Army. What are you going to be teaching at BU and why?
Why is a good question. Within the School of Journalism, I'll complete the story for you. This past June, as Stu mentioned, I was blessed enough to be inducted into the Massachusetts Association of Broadcasters Hall of Fame. And thank you. Trust me, I was more shocked than you. So, my dear friend and former partner, Michael Hawley, was at the event as well. And Michael still does some work at NBC Sports Boston, but his primary employment right now is as an adjunct professor at Boston University. And Michael came up to me and he said, "Look, if you've got a few minutes before you leave, we've got to talk." We went off to the side and he said, "We've been talking within the School of Journalism at BU that we don't have a sports play-by-play class." And we thought that somebody who's done play-by-play for 5 teams in this town might be the right guy to teach that. So within the School of Journalism and School of Communications, I'm going to teach a sports play-by-play class. Talk to the kids about how to prepare and how to do it and the nuts and bolts of doing it. And I'm looking forward to it. I'm a little bit nervous. My son, who I mentioned, who got his PhD from Yale, is a professor at the University of Richmond. He's preparing me right now. So he'll talk me through it.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I used to enjoy listening to you and Eddie Edelman on the radio.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you talk a little bit about that association.
It was an association that was forced upon us. Glenn Ordway was the program director of the radio station at the time. Glenn Ordway was going to take over the afternoon drive position that Eddie held down. And he called us in and said that he was going to put us together on a midday program. I had been working middays by myself for the years leading up to that. Eddie didn't like it at all because he was solo in afternoon drive and he was now being stuck in middays with me. So he wasn't very happy about it. The problem for Eddie and for me, because I didn't like it very much either, the problem is it really worked. We ended up doing like 9s and 10s, which in radio is phenomenal ratings. So we both got 5-year contract extensions. So we ended up, what was supposed to be a 1 year out the door, thanks for coming, ended up being 6 years. And I don't know if Eddie was ever happy with the fact that he had a co-host sitting there with him. He was especially unhappy when said co-host would correct him on things. But we had a good professional working relationship, a very successful professional working relationship. I haven't seen him for a number of years now. I ran into him at Milton's Clothing a few years ago, and I got a chance to just say hello briefly at that point. I hope he's doing well, but I haven't seen him in a little bit of time. Yes? Stu's got to put his roller skates on all the way up here. Let me just interject here while we've got a moment. It's one of my joys in life. I love visiting cathedrals, and churches, and synagogues, and house of worship. Whoever opened those sliding doors, thank you. I appreciated the opportunity to just gaze. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for coming this morning. This has been a great talk. Can you talk a little bit about the impact of sports betting has had on sports in general, professional sports, collegiate sports?
What a great question, because I talked about the bitterness and unhappiness in sports. I think a big chunk of that goes to exactly what you're talking about. It's funny, back not that long ago when I was working in the sports, you couldn't even have a casino advertise with a sports team. Mohegan Sun couldn't advertise with the Celtics or the Bruins or anyone else. Now, you've got sports betting companies advertising. You've got DraftKings and all of these sorts of things. I do think that there's a portion of the bitterness among the fan base that's directly tied to how much money they've lost betting on this team most recently. And I do think that's a big part of it. I understand financially why they do it. There's a lot of money involved. And the teams and the athletes can now advertise, can serve as spokespeople for some of these entities where they couldn't even talk about them not that many years ago. You wonder, and you're seeing it happen now. A couple of the Cleveland Guardians pitchers were suspended at the end of the season for allegations about betting. Pete Rose is still not in the Hall of Fame because of sports betting. You know, the one unbreakable rule within the sport. I wonder where it's headed. And I have to admit that maybe it's too easy for people. Oh yeah, I'll take $50 on the Patriots today, and the next thing you know, you're bitter because your kid's lunch money just disappeared. And I think that's happening. Hi.
Good morning, Carol Spack. I
Carol.
did college radio in WHRB.
Nice.
My question for you is, what did you envision, even though people are listening to you, as your audience? And how has the audience changed? And when you teach your class at BU, what do you expect and what do you describe to them as what is likely those individuals' audience, male, female, age, distribution in the country?
It's a great question, Carol. I will say this truthfully. When I was doing a game on radio or doing a game on TV, I tried not to think about the audience. I mean, I knew that if I was doing a Bruins game on Nesson, 99% of my audience were Bruins fans. I understood that. But the way I've always described the position and the way I will describe it to my students at Boston University is, as far as I'm concerned, when I'm doing a game on the radio, there are only two people in the world. There's me, and there's the one person who's listening to me. And if that one person listening to me feels that relationship, then hopefully every person feels the exact same thing. I know full well that it's not one, but I want that person to feel that they're the only one. So I always try, you've never heard me say folks, or I never said that because I wanted this to be a personal one-on-one relationship. With me, well, should have included my color guy. There were three of us, okay? There was me, the color guy, and Alyssa. And that was it.
40 years.
So I try to approach it that way.
Yeah.
Now again, you've got to think about who your audience is just in terms of logistics. As I said, if I'm doing a Bruins game on Nesson, 99% of my audience is a Bruins fan. So I probably shouldn't get overly exuberant when the Montreal Canadiens score. I also don't want to act despondent because I'm trying to be a professional. Excuse me. So, you yell when they score, but you yell louder when the Bruins score. It's just how it's supposed to go.
It's been actually very interesting, and I'm not an overall sports fan. The question I have is, over the years we've been doing it, clearly the cost of a game, both the attendees and the amount of money that the players are making, has skyrocketed to the point that, in my opinion, it's a level of absurdity. I just wanted you to comment on that. I mean, the effect it's having on the game, the effect that the agents are having on the game, and then the effect it's having on the audiences.
It's a great question. I'm back to yet another reason why I sense there's some bitterness and unhappiness amongst the fandom. If you're a husband and you're going to bring your wife and your 2 kids to a Bruins game, chances are you're doing without it for a couple of months to be able to save up enough money to give your family an opportunity to spend the night at a Bruins game or a Celtics game or Red Sox. I'm just using that as my example. So they go out and get beat 5-1. And you're thinking, we didn't go to dinner out anywhere for the last 2 months. We didn't let our kids do anything extraneous for the last couple of months so that I could be here for this event. They don't act like they care. That makes me mad. I'll extend it to high school sports. People have to pay to play high school sports now. I have a daughter who played hockey up through college, is a physical education and health teacher in Franklin, and coached the high school girls team there for a while. And what you find is that everybody's paying for their son or daughter to play sports. And so the person who's paying for Susie here to play goes to the coaches and says, I pay just as much for Susie to play as he's paying for Betsy to play. How come Betsy's playing more than Susie is? I've got the same investment in this as they have. And again, I go back to the unhappiness that you're seeing, and it does go back in large part, in my opinion, to the finances of the game. Now, I don't begrudge what athletes make. I don't. We were discussing Shohei Ohtani at the table earlier. They can't pay him enough as far as I'm concerned. And the line I always use is for people who say, there's no way they should be paying so-and-so that amount of money. I always say, so you'd turn it down? So you'd say no? No, you wouldn't. Well, how much do they need to live on? As much as somebody's going to give them. And I don't see any of these professional sports teams going bankrupt. I don't see any of them in receivership. In fact, the values of these teams are expanding exponentially. So no matter how much money they're paying their athletes, they're doing just fine. Thank you very much. I understand the bitterness of some people about it, but I don't begrudge anything that athletes make.
Thank you very much for coming.
Thank
Did you ever meet Johnny Most?
Yes.
And how was he?
He was great. I didn't work with Johnny. Glenn Ordway did, but I met him a couple of times.
He had that voice, and
I have a terrible voice for radio, but I thought, my God, he made a living with that voice. So he was just exactly what you heard on the radio. It's who he was in real life. He was irascible. He, to use my phrase from earlier today, didn't give a damn. He would say what he wanted to say, and he bled Celtics green. So if he thought Bill Laimbeer was taking advantage of one of his Boston Celtics, he was going to tell you about it. And I appreciate it. It was a different style than mine, but he was one of the best.
Casey Stengler said that the secret of the magic was keeping the 6 guys who hated you away from the 6 who are the others who are undecided. You've hanged around, seen a lot of managers and coaches at work. What, in your opinion, has been the most important things for making those who are successful, and those who failed, unsuccessful?
You know, it's funny because there really is a difference. And I'll give you a couple of examples locally off the top of my head. Bill Belichick was not exactly soft and cuddly, okay? But man, was he wildly successful. It had something to do with a guy named Brady. I get it. But he coached a whole bunch of other guys on that team besides Brady. He had a certain style that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, but he was wildly successful at it. At the polar opposite end of the spectrum, for me, was Terry Francona, who everybody on the team loved. I loved. I mean, genuinely one of the nicest people I've ever met. And was also wildly successful. Has been successful wherever he's managed. So I don't want to try to pigeonhole things and say you've got to be this way, or you've got to be that way. You've got to be like Belichick. Well, Rick Pitino tried to be like Belichick. How'd that work out? As they say in the business, it's not the X's and O's, it's the Jimmies and Joes. If you don't have the players, it doesn't matter what your style is. If you have the players, it probably doesn't matter what your style is.
I'm interested in any insight you have on amateur sports, because as the role of money rises, so you wonder how that's choking the spirit of some sports. So I just wondered what your thoughts were there.
You know, and it's an interesting point you make, because you think about the Ryder Cup just took place here, a month and a half ago. And the U.S. Ryder Cup members demanded and were paid for the first time. The European team was not paid. Which team looked like they were having more fun to you as you were watching it? Olympic athletes are being paid. College athletes with the NIL money are getting huge amounts of money. Arch Manning is a multimillionaire, and I'm not sure he's the best quarterback at Texas. It is the way of the world, and if I say I don't begrudge professional athletes what they get paid, it's hard for me to begrudge, a quarterback at the University of Texas making what he can make. It is what the market will bear, but it does go back to that. Well, in youth sports, and I coached youth sports for a long time. My daughter did as well, and I think that I'm using college athletics as the example here. For many people, they've got little Johnny playing hockey 11 months out of the year, because little Johnny has got to get good, because he's got to get a scholarship, because then I don't have to pay for him to go beat you. And you see the pressure being put on kids when they're that tall, waiting for them to get that tall. Every professional athlete I've ever spoken to that I've asked the question of, I'd say to Ray Bork, "Did you play hockey year-round?" He said, "God, no. I'd have been sick of it when I was 12 if I did that." But that's what you're seeing happen more and more, whether it's hockey or baseball or basketball or football. Youngsters are being pigeonholed, and I do think part of it, not all of it, but part of it, is the financial burden that the parents face.
I just have a quick question about the various sports, and one thing I noted is baseball is a very long season, hundreds of games and all that.
162 plus.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, compared to like the Patriots, they're playing hopefully more than 17, but at least 17 games. And the build up every week is there. And, do you think that other sports would benefit from a reduced schedule to increase popularity?
They might benefit from that, but they can't afford it. Going back to the salaries that we've been discussing, and the National Hockey League increased their regular season schedule from 80 to 82. The National Football League went from 16. Well, they used to be 14. Then they went to 16. Now they're at 17. They're going to 18. They're going to take away a preseason game and add a regular season game because of the finances of the sport. So yes, I think all sports would benefit from reducing the schedule and, by the way, reducing the number of franchises. But it's not going to happen. Not in our lifetime.
There's been a lot of talk about money in sports, gambling, salaries.
By the way, if I've gone on too much about that, I apologize. It's
not to me. It's a little-known fact that professional sports teams are tax-exempt nonprofits. That's why municipal bonds are used to build some stadiums. So my question to you is, should they become for-profit corporations and pay taxes?
Of course. And by the way, we don't do that in this state. We don't pay for teams sports facilities. The TD Garden was privately funded. Gillette Stadium was privately funded. We don't do it here. You're right. There are places in this country where they do, and I find it ridiculous. Taxpayer dollars should not be used. Taxpayer dollars shouldn't be used to buy me a house. They shouldn't be used to buy the Celtics a stadium. So, no, I don't think it's right. We don't do it here. We haven't done it here in years and years. I guess it's what the market will bear. If the Carolina Panthers decide they need a new stadium and they tell the people of Carolina, either build us one or we're going to go to St. Louis or to Arizona or go wherever, chances are people will cave and give them what they want.
Speaking as a grandmother, our grandson is at the University of Maryland, and he's a journalism major.
Nice.
And
he can't take my job anymore, so I wish him well.
This is what I'm going to ask you. What are the chances of him getting a job after? Because I know it's so competitive, and aside from taking your class, is there anything that he should be doing? He's loves it.
Is he a broadcast journalist or print, or what does he want to do?
Broadcast.
Broadcast, okay.
Yep.
The single biggest piece of advice I give to young people who want to get into the broadcast journalism end of it is you've got to talk into a microphone. You've got to do it. When I was 15 years old and doing high school football on the commercial radio station in town, I also was taking a tape recorder, and the sports information director at Bowdoin College would let me sit in a little booth in the press box at Bowdoin and practice and do the Bowdoin football games into my tape recorder. Thank God no one ever heard them but me. But you've got to do it. And if that means local access cable, if that means taking your digital recorder to a press box and being allowed to do it there, you've got to do it. And you've got to get experience. The one thing I'll say is that as technology and the industry expands, there are more outlets. You know, YouTube didn't exist when I was growing up, so that wasn't an option for me. It is now. TikTok and all of these other venues. So there are more opportunities for him as he progresses in the industry. The other piece of advice I tell young people is don't think you get to start on third base. So many youngsters think that, I want to be a baseball announcer. So I'm going to write to all the major league teams and see if they'll hire me. I started doing high school games on the radio. I progressed to doing college games on the radio. I spent 8 years in the minor leagues of hockey in the American Hockey League before I became an overnight sensation and got to work in the NHL. You got to pay your dues. You've got to work your way up. There are rare broadcasters who are so good and so talented, they get to start on third base. Chances are, no disrespect to your grandson, I don't even know him, chances are he's not one of those because mathematically there are very few of those. So get in front of a microphone, speak, talk, be critical, listen to yourself, play it for people you trust, and don't take it personally when they're critical, and improve your craft, step by step.
I was wondering what your take is on the Saudis offering multi-million-dollar contracts to professional golfers to leave the PGA.
Well, I go back to a point I made earlier about I never begrudge athletes whatever they make. And when I look at my phrase, when I look at the stupid money being offered on the LIV Tour, I say to myself, should Greg Norman have said no? And I can't answer that one. It's even happening in the pseudo sport, quote unquote, of professional wrestling. You know, where WrestleMania is going to Riyadh, I think, next year, because they are offering hundreds of millions of dollars. They have it, they're spending it, and
They take Ronaldo.
pardon me?
They take Cristiano Ronaldo.
Yeah, the money that they're offering so otherworldly that it's hard for me to be critical of people who say yes, because I probably might say yes.
Why do you see AI as impacting sports, but also the broadcasting of sports?
Scares the hell out of me. AI does. The deep fakes that you're seeing now being utilized within the political sphere, I do think it, in my opinion, just an opinion, it's going to be hard for AI to produce a play-by-play announcer. That's just my opinion. To be able to react to what you see immediately, to take your listeners or viewers through the same emotional roller coaster, I think it's going to be difficult for AI. Now, this shows maybe AI is far more advanced than I believe and that they can do anything. Maybe they can. But I do think that there's a relationship between the listener or the viewer and the announcer and the team, which I think is going to be difficult for AI to reproduce. I say that, I'm not in the business anymore, so again, they can't come take my job. But I hope for the people like that lady's grandson who's trying to make his way in the business that they can't come take his job either.
I have a twofer.
Okay.
The first one is, what was it like to work with Jack Edwards? That man was so ridiculously funny that you would bust a gut.
Yeah, he didn't care too much about the Bruins, did he?
I can't even imagine in what world he would think of the things he would say that were just absolutely hilarious. And the other thing is, what's it like listening to other games where the commentary and our former players, they're like Scalabrini and the guys that used to play. So they're announcing techniques and styles.
I'll start with the second half first, and then I'll get back to Jeff. What you see very little of are former athletes doing play-by-play. There are some, but there's not a lot. Former athletes primarily are used as color announcers, and I think they're perfectly suited for that. Who knows better what's going on that diamond at Fenway Park than a guy who played there, and what the athlete on the field is going through and what they're thinking. So I think athletes as color announcers are essential. As I said, there are a few, but not many, who do play-by-play. I think our job's too hard. They couldn't do it. No, I'm just kidding. I think that part's not going to change. Now, as far as Jack is concerned, I mentioned to this lady earlier that, if I'm doing a Bruins game on TV, 99% of my audience are Bruins fans. Jack said it's 100%. He was the most decidedly home team-oriented announcer I may have ever met, more than Johnny Most, who I was asked about earlier. Jack, as we say in the business, bled black and gold. And like Johnny Most, the other team was the enemy, and the other guys were bad guys, and the home team guys were heroes. And Jack played to that emotion perfectly. He loved everything about his job, and it was unfortunate that he was just unable physically to continue to do the job, because I promise you, to this day, he feels the exact same way about the team and about the sport that he did when he was doing the games.
Just want to thank you for coming out to Framingham.
It was an easy commute from Woolwich, Maine.
Like a half hour.
Actually, truthfully, that's a lie. I spent the last 2 days playing with my grandsons down here, so it was all good.
Sounds like a lot of fun. Just wondering when you found your voice, because I found your voice so special, melodic, it's really cool. When did you find your voice?
Well, first of all, thank you. I have spent an entire career, or did spend an entire career, hating my voice, hating everything about my voice. When I went to do the Bruins games on radio, the guy who preceded me in the play-by-play position was a guy named Bob Wilson. And Bob Wilson had this big, deep, giant voice. So that the next year when I took over the games, I felt like I should be saying, "Hi, Mr. Disney." And so I had a heck of a time overcoming that. What I found was that you can only play the instrument God gave you. And that whether I liked it or not, it kept getting me hired. And that the voice was important, but maybe wasn't as important as some other things that I could control. I could control effort. I could control preparation. I could control enthusiasm. I couldn't control the voice. So I did the best I could with what I had, and thankfully was able to make a living.
Thank you.
Yeah, can you comment on the Red Sox television announcing team? Because I'm dissatisfied with them. They joke between themselves, and it's not a happy takeover. I shut down their voices, just read the captions on the
You know, I hear people say that all the time. You're the only person I know who actually, I think, does it. I will preface what I'm about to say by telling you they're all friends of mine, okay? Dave O'Brien, I think, is one of the great play-by-play announcers in this country. And I might wish that there were fewer color announcers. I think that Nesson has had a tendency over the last few years to kind of rotate this group of people, which are hard, I think, for viewers to, who am I listening to today? Who am I, when you had Don Orsillo and Jerry Remy, you knew you had them every game. And so you knew who you were listening to. I understand what you're saying about the style of it, and you're not a fan of it. But I will also say that baseball can be really slow. and I mean, luckily, if you're doing the game on TV, you're seeing. You know what you're looking at. If you're doing the game on radio, that's different. I've got to take you to the field. I've got to paint the picture for you. And I can't be doing that if I'm, playing slap and tickle with my color guy next to me. So TV is different. You do have more freedom to wander a little bit. I do also understand that stylistically, there are some people who like that and some people who don't. But if you're willing to turn the sound down and read the closed captioning, God love you, you are dedicated. I'm impressed.
Hi.
Hi.
Bob Rosefeland. Tom Brady was a very special player. Do you have any comments about Tom?
I'm a huge Tom Brady fan, as anybody who watched football in these parts were. I'll give you a quick Tom Brady story to illustrate how I think he is. The year that he hurt his knee and lost the entire season, he disappeared. I mean, literally disappeared. And as it turns out, we didn't know this at the time, but he got an infection in his knee, a staph infection, which at the time very seriously called into question whether he'd ever be able to play again. So everybody was wondering, where's Tom? How come we don't hear from him? How come the Patriots don't say anything? How bad is it? And I was doing Patriots Monday down at Gillette Stadium, as I did every week during the football season. And if you know nothing else about me, know that time freaks me out. I'm early. I was sitting in your parking lot at 8 o'clock this morning because it's just the way I was raised. So I was at Gillette Stadium over an hour before the show started, and I'm just sitting there all by myself with my computer, doing my homework, getting ready. And the door opens and Tom walks in. And he looks up a little startled and he goes, "Hi, Dale." I said, "Hi, Tom." And he said, "I'm sorry, I've got to record this thing." It was the studio at Gillette. He said, "I've got to record this thing." I said, "No problem." And I got up and I stepped out and he did whatever he had to do. And as he walked out, he stopped and he said, "Can I ask you a favor?" I said, "Sure." He said, "You didn't see me today, okay?" I said, "Okay." And he shook my hand and he thanked me. And now he could have played the prima donna, but he didn't do that. He treated me like a human being. And he was a human being who had some concerns about the future of his career and how things were going to be. And he just asked a simple favor. Because the natural instinct for me maybe would have been to go on the radio and say, I saw Tom Brady today, when people literally hadn't seen him in 3 months. But he asked like a human being, and I tried to respond like a human being. I really liked him a lot. I know some people don't. Maybe off the field. I don't know how anybody could dislike him on the field. But I'm not one of those. Thank you for this opportunity. I enjoyed breakfast. I enjoyed spending time with you. Thank you guys very much.